A couple of weeks ago now, we saw the release of the final installment of the Downton Abbey franchise, Downton Abbey, the grand finale. After 15 years and 6 seasons of the television show and now 3 movies, at long last, it's all over. I've always been a long-time enjoyer of a good period drama, to tell you the truth. When I was a kid, my parents were always watching adaptations of Jane Austen books, such as the all-time classic 1995 BBC miniseries. Then there's the film from 10 years later, true classics of the screen. There are plenty more than that I saw in those days, but I think you get the gist of things. Then in 2010, the first season of Downton Abbey came out and it was just incredible. An obsession was born and I was fully invested. Until Matthew died at the end of season 3 and it was just a definitive buzzkill no matter what way you slice it. The show was never the same after that, and sometime during season 4 I just fell off the wagon completely. I knew that they did have a couple more seasons after that, and then after a bit of a hiatus they came back with some movies, starting with the first in 2019 and then the second in 2022. I didn't really engage with them though, and I'm not really sure as to why. I think it just wasn't until I was getting into Bridgerton that it all started to click back into place, and I figured a rewatch of the series would be in order. I was once again tempted to fall off the wagon after seeing Matthew's death and the aftermath yet again, but I held firm and kept on watching and then watched the 2 films after that. Whilst there were some plot lines that were less good than others, the Bates and their constant legal troubles or the whole Henry Talbot storyline in general, at the same time it was a lot of fun overall, and it got me massively hyped to go and see the 3rd movie. But at the same time, I came into it feeling weirdly melancholy about it all. Despite me having taken a long time off from the franchise, now that I've made a return to it, I don't want it to go away. Oh well, it is what it is. Maybe one day they'll have some sort of continuation that shoots the story forward another decade or 2, but we'll have to wait and see on that score. Anyway, just the other day I went to see the final film, and I thought it was pretty damn good, and it seems like the world at large agrees with that notion. It got a fairly good reception overall with a 92% critical approval score and a 96% audience score, and so far it's grossed $67 million over $50 million. So it's not like it's setting the world on fire and making huge mega bucks or anything of the sort, but it's chugging along quite nicely. It came out all the way back on the 12th, so we are over 2 weeks in. I don't expect it to be hugely impressive when it's all said and done, but at the same time, when you look a little deeper at the numbers, I think it is tracking above where Downton Abbey and New Era was sitting at this time. It's probably being carried a bit more by the fact that this is the finale. That being said, they're not going to be getting the same numbers as the first movie, I think that's clear, which had the benefit of coming out pre-COVID before it felt bank-breaking to attend the movies for a lot of people. And then also just because it was the first movie for the franchise after that long hiatus. It probably had the most hype behind it, and you can well and truly see that in the numbers that it got. This film's also apparently set to come out for digital release soon. I think premium streaming at first, where you still have to actually buy or rent it for an additional fee, so we'll see how much money they can make off of that. I don't know if it gets taken into account for the box office numbers though. I feel like it could be a much harder metric to keep track of with all the different platforms and whatnot. I hope it doesn't end up being a disappointment financially, because it would be nice for the franchise to finish off on a high note. However, I liked it, and I suppose for me, that's all that really matters. Before we get stuck into the storylines and everything that was going on, we'll just touch on the more general things. The visual side of things, the cinematography and all that, absolutely top notch. Nice and colourful and bright, which is something I think we're lacking in a lot of this current era of cinema. Everything's always dull and grey and bleak, but here, even when they were wearing those greys, things still felt lively. I'm not going to try to pretend like I have any knowledge as to whether the costuming and all that was accurate or not, but I will say to my uneducated layman's perspective, it looked good. Beyond that, what else is there to say in terms of the general things? Maybe a little bit about the acting. I rather enjoyed it. Once again, it's a bit hammy and over the top at times, but I think that's probably one of the things I enjoy most about it. It's intentionally melodramatic and it works so well. Oh, and the music was great too, can't forget about that. I feel that Downton overall really does have an underrated score when you think about it. It's really heartfelt and emotional. However, this then brings us to the narrative. The story picks up 2 years after the previous films ended, with a big party at the townhouse of Lady Petersfield. The night before, the family had attended Noel Coward's Bittersweet, starring Guy Dexter, to just reintegrate those characters into the story somewhat and give them a reason to be here. At the ball, the news breaks that Mary's recently gotten a divorce from Henry. And all the fandom rejoiced. This was clearly the right step, as the actor was obviously very finished with the role and had no intention of ever coming back. I do feel that the writer was a bit bitter though, because they went super hard on the hate train for this guy. He seemed really nice back in the show, and then here he has a mistress, and then he's paying an escort to pretend to be his mistress in court to keep her identity a secret. Now, I also feel the implication was that he was going to be a deadbeat dad. Yikes, Matthew would never. That being said, I do feel like there was not enough discussion in this film about how all of this was her family's fault. I remember her continually saying in the show that they're not well suited to one another, and everybody kept talking their shit about how they were clearly in love. Well, how the tables have turned. Then, of course, she becomes the social outcast, and her dad, whilst being somewhat supportive, is also judging her ass for this. Quite legitimately, she is one of the people who is least at fault. She got bullied into getting married in the first place, then she's the person being shunned and blamed when he cheats? Brutal. So the family attend the party and Mary ends up getting booted out for the horrible crime of being divorced because there are some royalty on the way to attend and it would offend their delicate sensibilities to be in her presence. She doesn't actually get all that much screen time, but Lady Petersfield was so good. So sycophantic and pathetic. She's all proud and eager to throw them out in favour of the royals, but later on at the horse races, when Lord Grantham doesn't come over to hang out with her, you can see she's panicking that she's damaged their social connection. Since whilst the royals are all well and good, they're probably not going to be regular attendees at her parties. Then there was her pretty much laying on the floor when she's greeting the royals when they arrive at her house. She comes across as so hateable, but in such a pathetic way. Just great writing and acting for the character. Obviously, things are a little tense in the house at this point, and so the elder Crawleys return to Downton, whilst Mary remains in town to meet her uncle, who's going to be visiting from America soon. When he arrives, he's accompanied by his financial advisor, Gus Sambrook, who seemed like he was being set up to be Mary's fresh romantic interest. In the end, though, it's just a one-night stand, and then he's revealed to be an antagonist later on, so we get faked out. I liked this subversion of expectations. As soon as they were flirting and spending time together, I was shaking my head because it simply felt like they were once again forcing her character into a box, and it was frustrating overall. Like they couldn't think of anything fresh. Instead, they managed to pivot it into a story of her trying to overcome her shame spiral and proving that despite everything that's going on in her life and the current scandals, that she is the best choice to take over the operations of Downton Abbey on a permanent basis. However, I will say, and this is not a knock on the actor's looks, but I don't get how she hooked up with this guy to begin with. He's handsome, yes, but he had this absolutely gross demeanor from the get-go. Absolute creeper vibes oozing out of this man, and yet I'm supposed to believe that he was able to charm her the way he did? I get that she was rebounding, but still, ugh. The story continues onwards though. 3 things in this life are certain: death, taxes, and the Crawley family encountering financial instability. Good old Harold has apparently lost a great deal of money. This guy, Sambrook, helped save him from the big Wall Street crash, but then encouraged him to invest in some company in Argentina that went bankrupt and lost the money. Whoopsie! Now Harold owes Sambrook and he wants to convince Cora to sell off the remaining assets from their mother's fortune to pay it off and then some. At the same time, the Crawleys were depending on that money to help them continue to maintain the estate, so it probably couldn't come at a worse time than this. I gotta say, I know that the crash and the depression are significant historical events, but good God, they really do go to that well a lot, don't they? It was even funnier to me that they didn't even lose their money in the financial crash, but afterwards through a bogus scam. So he comes crawling to Cora begging to be able to sell off the assets, and she tells him to get stuffed, and it all just goes horribly. Robert decides to engage Robert mode and gets hugely upset when Mary suggests selling their London townhouse, in order to raise the money they need. He also gets pretty salty that Harold screwed the pooch, although it could happen to anybody, Robert, let's not forget. And that Mary's gotten a divorce, which kind of left them as social pariahs in society, even their local one. Now Robert seems less willing to let go of things and let Mary take charge, and he's holding on for dear life. Of course, since Cora's holding firm, Sambrook turns to Mary to try to get her to reconsider, and then he threatens to blackmail her with the information that they had sex to get her to agree. I like that they didn't wait too long to make the big reveal that this dude sucks, although once again, he seemed so slimy the whole time that it makes little sense about how he was able to charm her to begin with. To me, this is the biggest plot hole, or rather, the biggest plot contrivance of them all. All of the other suitors she's ever had have been so suave and charming. Well, except for Sir Anthony Strallan. Oh, what a time that was. Then it's off to the races alongside Tom, who makes his appearance to join them, and who is conveniently, oh so conveniently, approached by an acquaintance who knows Sambrook and informs him that he's a hustler who swindles the fortunes of rich people and who's been milking Harold for the last little while. He's now attaching himself to Mary and also trying to make contacts with other aristocrats in England. Edith tells him to get lost or else, and off he goes forever whilst the Crawleys all make peace. Harold and Cora reconcile. Robert comes around on the idea of Mary running the estate, which he already should have because the show made it clear this guy is rather stupid, he lost all their money, and even then he was mismanaging things. He wasn't helping it become sustainable enough to survive into the long term. Yet here he is questioning everything. I love the character, but he is perhaps the most eternally frustrating man. In the end though, he comes round and moves into Violet's old house with Cora, taking Mr. and Mrs. Bates as their servants, whilst Baxter, Cora's old lady's maid, remains at the big house with Mary. All's well that ends well, but that's only the A plot. There's a lot of other side plots going on too. Noel Coward and Guy Dexter are invited to spend some time at Downton, and they're coming in just in time for the county fair. Mosley, in the meantime, is married Miss Baxter, and is a full-time screenwriter, but it's gone to his head, and now he's a shit husband and a shit bloke, really. He's pretentious and up himself, acting like a total elitist, and it's such a shame because I feel like it does somewhat spoil his character's ending from the previous movie, where his first thought on his new salary was getting married. Then you see the reality of their life, that he's a total blowhard. Man. It's funny that he did get his ass humbled, but he becomes so pathetic that it was at times hard to watch him. He reckons that Dexter's going to recognise him at the dinner and introduce him to Noel Coward, and so he volunteers to be a footman, and Dexter just forgets him completely. It works out in the end, and Coward talks to him and tells him that he enjoys his work, but it's still rather cringy to sit through. Typical Mosley, I guess, but I could have done without it. The rest of the story was fun though. Barrow getting his happy ending, Daisy, Carson and Isabel teaming up to take down the snooty chairman of the county fair board who's a traditionalist, classist and misogynistic asshole. He gets outplayed and he gets humbled. Mary gives a speech at the event and awards Mr. Mason the fair's main award. They get back in with the local society as Noel Coward and Guy Dexter visit Downton, and so suddenly the Crawley family are all interesting. And I suppose it's not so bad to be divorced, really. Then the best scene of the whole movie is Mary having visions of Matthew and Sybil and Violet. A top tier ending, and we're all crying out there in the cinema. So, yeah, I would say that there were a couple of plot conveniences and silly moments, but it was a fun and heartfelt movie. A sweet finale to the show that ties off the final loose ends, reverses a couple of questionable writing choices, and moves the family into the future. Seems pretty definitive, doesn't it? Maybe one day we can have another film or show or something with an older Mary, but for now it seems like goodbye. It's a shame, but it's also probably time. It was a great ending though, and I'm thankful they didn't bungle the finale like so many series seem to do in this day and age, and they went out on a high. So with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of Downton Abbey the grand finale? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and let me know.